Hello and welcome to 3D, the Development Design Digest, where we speak with leading lights in rural development, those who take a whole of society approach, a design approach, to finding solutions that don't just bring progress, but bring progress at scale. And today I have the privilege of being joined by one of the leading voices within government, recently retired IAS officer, Mr. N.N. Sinha, who was the Secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development, where he was responsible for leading such programs as INEGRA and NRLM, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission. He was also the Secretary of the Ministry of Steel and the Chairman of the Highways Authority of India, the National Highways Authority of India, and I could probably go on and on. Suffice to say, it's all a very long way from his electrical engineering degree at none other than IIT Kanpur. Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to dig into so much of what you've been responsible for and helped in the building of so many lives in rural India. But I'd like to begin first with a story that has impacted you the most. I always think it's interesting to hear people say and tell the story of their career that really impacted them, especially when you're working with so many people whose lives you've changed. Is there one story that really touched you the most?
That's right. So what happened was I was returning from a district in Jharkhand and passing through the countryside, not taking the usual national highway route, and this passed through the village roads, and this was the month of September or so, and I saw all the paddy fields dry up, the paddy plants shriveled. Then that struck me the issue of lack of water availability and the centrality of the water supply to the fields. So that day I decided that I must do something for ensuring water availability for at least the Kharif season, the main growing season. And then it so happened that I was also heading the Rural Development Department, and the NREGA was within my portfolio. So we decided to have farm ponds, usually about 20 feet by 20 feet in size or 30 feet by 30 feet in size, and place them in upland so that whenever it rained, they got filled up with water, and it was usually sufficient for providing water supply to the paddy fields for about a month or so, and by that time we would have another spell of rain. So that in fact defined my approach towards the improving water availability and natural resource management. There's many stories like that, but that in fact helped me launch a major campaign for augmenting the water availability and water infrastructure within the rural areas.
And was this something that you were then able to roll out across beyond Jharkhand, or was this strictly a statewide initiative? I'm interested in this impact and rolling things out as you're somebody at the forefront.
Yeah, actually, initially we were doing it within the Rural Development Department, and then Agriculture Department picked it up, and then it so happened that other governments also picked up, and that year I believe within the state we created about 1.5 lakh ponds, which we call Doba in local language. And then within the country also, I guess somewhere around 5 lakhs or so farm ponds were built. Another model which I am also extremely proud of is the model of the mango orchards or fruit orchards being grown out of NREGA. And there usually what happened is that the programs like National Horticulture Mission or such other programs partially financed the farmers, and say about to the extent of 50%. They didn't ensure that during the period that the plants usually take to grow, the farmer was incentivized to ensure that the field is well looked after. And this risk is more in the case of the marginal farmers to whom NREGA applies. So what we started out with is to ensure that not only the person is enabled and supported to the maximum extent in planting the orchard, but also enabled to take income out of the plot right from the year one.
Wow.
And so we help them grow vegetables by enabling them to dig water sources, level the land, and develop it so that it becomes useful for the cultivation of vegetables, do some rudimentary fencing. So that in fact improved the health of the crops and survival of the orchard up to the extent of about 80 to 90%, which usually doesn't happen.
And what's extraordinary is you called this the mango orchard program, and yet you're talking about vegetables. So what you're talking about is the idea of using a plot of land for many purposes. Multi-cropping instead of getting away from the monocropping.
That's
and
right.
the impact is 80%.
Yes.
That's astonishing.
That is really astonishing. In fact, from a coverage of around 100 acres, I believe I'm told that every year they plant orchards of about 25,000 acres or so in Jharkhand. I'm not sure about other states.
I think we have such a notion of Indian farming, the smallholder farmer that has just this tiny plot of land because it's been divided inheritance by so many families that present day the farmer might only have a small plot of land. And monocropping had helped for so long in India get us through the green revolution, and yet now we're finding you got to go back to the way it was 100 or so years ago. And do you think that if we apply these kind of methods that we can reverse that migration trend of rural Indians going to the cities and working in jobs that are and living in situations that are not very happy and conducive to a great lifestyle?
In fact, improving water availability, augmenting the livelihood opportunities, going to say double cropping or so, and doing multiplicity of village-based livelihood activities, for example, fisheries, goateries, poultry, and coupled with the mainline farming and horticulture. People have proven time and again in multiple locations that they need not migrate in search of better livelihoods. They can get it right there, and they're not living in very poor living conditions, which they usually do in the urban areas.
That's right. How do we convince them? How do you bring that shift on? Because there's such a notion that it's a life full of dreary drudge work. How do you convince those laborers not to go into the cities, but to stay and build their farms? What's missing?
They don't see immediate prospect of livelihood improving. But if there are models, and there are many, so if you tell them and go visit those places, interact with the farmers who have done it in the past, nothing beats like them. We can tell them any stories. But if they have talked to the fellow travelers like them and see how their lives have been transformed, it usually makes a lot of impact.
Okay, so that we need to be interviewing those farmers then too, right?
That's right.
And letting them spread the message.
That's right.
Okay, and is there something else that can be done in terms of whether it's policy or getting more businesses involved or changing community mindsets that could also help in changing this idea that rural India is not a place of prosperity?
See, I think now there is increased interaction and engagement between the rural India and the urban India. So to the extent we can tap on that linkage, it's better. So for example, you grow vegetables in the rural India, and then you set up a value chain so that they are transported to the urban India towns, and there farmers are able to get a larger percentage of the value that is there in the value chain. So I think this kind of models enabling higher productivity, more livelihood opportunities, better living conditions. I think there is a lot to be said for the village life. We don't get the best life in the urban areas.
In the urban areas, right. You've several times already used the word model. We've got to get the right model. That is designing a process, isn't it? And it's interesting that you talked about it can't just be, oh, I can teach you how to build, how to grow many crops in one field and make the most of it. That's no use if you can't. It's great for feeding your family, but you want to actually make a livelihood from it. Therefore, you mentioned market linkages. Are you saying that we need to take a wider lens when we're looking at these models about connecting all the dots? That's the design approach, isn't it? That whole of a society approach. Do you think that's something that's lacking in rural India?
I think it's lacking in many parts of the development administration in countries. So when we don't look at engaging the villagers while designing projects, because ultimately it's people need to provide part of the expenses of the operation. They need to be able to maintain it. They need to be able to deal with the after effects of any development activity. To take one concrete example, let's say you bring in piped water supply. There is abundance of water. How do we dispose of the grey water? And if it accumulates, then it becomes source of breeding of mosquitoes and other insects. So it brings in more sanitation. So if we have a water supply, piped water supply, then how to deal with the after effects. So when we are designing things, we ought to look at whole lot of preceding activities and the succeeding activities, and we dialoguing with the community about it as to who will take care of it, who will operate it, how will this be maintained, and how will to deal with the issues that are ancillary to the main activity. So dealing with the entire gamut of things, dialoguing with people, and then finding out a solution which is satisfactory and which can work, which is resilient, sustainable. That's the approach I believe we should be taking in our development activity and anywhere.
Yes, of course, and piloting it in a small area first and seeing what works.
What works, yes.
Okay, but India is an incredibly diverse country. So what works in Jharkhand might not work in Chhattisgarh. So how do you square that circle?
See, I mean, you have a model, and so that becomes the initial point of discussion. So a model cannot be mechanically copied. Model becomes the starting point of dialogue, and then we have to see what will work in the community by dialoguing with the community and arriving at the optimal solution which will work in that particular area. It is not guaranteed that it's going to work 100% time, but most likely.
So design a solution, create a model, try it out, and then when you take it somewhere else, absolutely first base, engage the community and see if it works. This, of course, also requires the staff, the government staff and NGOs and anyone else who might be in this process to be trained to know how to do that. Do you think there's enough of that happening, or do we need to up that capacity building?
Capacity obviously needs to be improved, but it needs improvement not in terms of technical capacity, in terms of the behavioral training, in terms of the belief that the person from the village is not a supplicant or not a inferior position, but he's a person for whom you are working, and so you should need to cast that ego of being in a superior position and be ready to dialogue on an equal footing and bringing out their own concerns, and then with dialogue be in a position to find out what might be a solution which will be acceptable to the community.
So it's really interesting, right? You're talking about changing mindsets, not just with the villagers or the stakeholders, but the people interacting with them and respecting them. Is that hard?
It's quite hard. Quite hard.
How can we change that? How can we make that easier?
I think multiple rounds of engagement with the community, telling them the wonderful things that the community has done, and probably superiors also engaging on a humbler basis with the community. So I mean, if suppose I as a secretary go to a village and I sit with them on a carpet with all of them, I think it brings a lot of change in the attitude of the hierarchy down below.
Interesting. Okay, lovely. Well said. I would like to. We've talked about a design approach and siloed thinking. I want to know how this has applied with some of the programs that you've worked on, particularly the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, because I understand that you found that. Though the name is the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, that the biggest impact that it's had has been with women, and not just their livelihoods, but so many different aspects of their life and how they're interacting within the family and out of the family. Can you tell me, was that a surprise for you? And can you elaborate on some of these changes and impacts that NRLM had?
So, I mean, one thing which I have inversely noticed is the issue of identity that the women acquire through engagement with the NRLM program. So they are no longer, let's say, daughter of somebody or daughter-in-law of somebody or mother of somebody. So they are by themselves a person who has a name, who has an identity, and that identity is respected by the community and the government department officials or public officials. I think that is one of the biggest gains I feel I see all around.
So the identity was left outside the door.
That's right.
When they got together, they were just 10 women trying to help build an initiative or a project.
In fact, there was no identity. You are daughter of somebody, you are mother of somebody, you are sister of somebody, and so you are bringing that identity which was within their homes probably to public. And that becomes a person rather than appendage of some other identity. So that's one of the biggest things. The other thing which I have noticed in many places, can't say universally, but many places, most of the places I should say, is their fear of engaging with the public officials and public institutions goes away.
Goes away?
Yes. So they can go to the police station, they can go to the bank, they can go to the panchayat, they can go to the post office and then engage with them and assert their rights. So that's also wonderful.
That's huge.
Yes.
I mean, we have this phrase in the social sector, right? We have to build people's agency. But actually, when you break it down to people who were afraid to talk to authority, whether it's the police or even a bank clerk, and therefore would avoid doing things like reporting crimes or getting money owed to them.
Yeah.
Through this program, you're saying they were able to have that voice, that confidence.
That's right. That's right.
How did that happen?
I think when you start engaging as an individual and in a group consisting solely of women, you don't deal with being somebody's mother or somebody's daughter or somebody's sister. You deal on your own. So learning to deal with them, having a peer support and that the support group that you have, that also helps you engage with those officials and those institutions. So this supportive ecosystem and opportunity to engage on your own, these things have helped women acquire agencies.
And let's talk about this in some practical examples. Can you give me examples of somebody that you know who was, did you say somebody's daughter, sister, identified by her caste or her creed or her language or whatever, has become a leader? Are you talking about women who become women sarpanches? Are you talking about people who not only get a livelihood and become an entrepreneur and can feed their families, but they also become leaders in their communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I was told that in Kerala, 40% of the SHG members who contested panchayat elections got themselves elected, and this is happening in many places, not in as many numbers as in Kerala. Kerala has been a leading society for women empowerment for quite some time, but in places as retrograde and retrogressive as Bihar or Chhattisgarh. Women are coming forward and they are taking leadership roles in panchayats.
And these aren't just proxy roles where the husband is really...
No, they can't allow, they won't allow.
They won't, okay. The cat is out of the bag.
Yes.
Okay. And how do the men feel about it?
Haven't seen much, but wherever I have seen, men generally adjust. There would certainly be resistance initially, but I think when they see that women has access to, let's say, availability of credit or they can deal with public institutions that help them also access their rights which they were otherwise denied.
So it helps the whole family.
That's right.
It helps the whole family. You get access to credit, to money, to financing. Also, you know about certain schemes, certain networks and people that you can liaise with that before people were too afraid, even the men were too afraid to liaise.
In fact, I mean, my idea of the NRLM program is that women are the spearheads, but it ultimately designed for the entire household. So there is no conflict between the male and the female, men and the woman, husband and wife. Just that the woman is a spearhead. So in the process, we get more agency of the women, and probably the equation between them is more level than it was earlier.
And it's 15 years, isn't it, since it was implemented.
Uh-huh.
A lot of programs, when they hit that sort of 10, 15-year spot, they're no longer the favorite initiative of government, and sometimes they run the risk of sort of being deissued, of being sort of taken off.
Yeah.
Is there any threat of that? Do you think NRLM is here to stay for a long time, or are there new initiatives that might come and garner more interest?
In fact, you know, it has become a platform. So this platform approach enables many other programs to ride on it. What the fear is somewhat opposite, because so many programs are riding on this platform that I feel that women are not getting the time or resources to kind of support or work on their initial promise or initial agenda of improving livelihoods. So for example, sanitation rights on it, education rights on it, health also comes in. So and if you see at the state level, there are many other programs that also want to come in. So that becomes somewhat
Distracting.
Distracting, yeah.
Okay, but if you don't have those other things in order, you could still be making money. But if you don't have basic sanitation or health, I suppose.
I agree, but the fear is that the people who are directing the program at this moment should be careful not to let other agendas on the platform dominate the core agenda.
Fair enough, especially since you have seen that it has had such an impact.
Yes.
So what are some of the other programs that you've worked on that you feel that have been great models that could be replicated? Is it time to decommission them? Are they victims of their own success, or are these some of these programs going to go on for the next 50 years?
See, one program which you mentioned while introducing me is the NREGA. I feel NREGA is a great weapon in Indian rural communities to fight against the invoked climate change, because the watershed approach that is required to be followed in NREGA is something that can improve the natural resources within the community and probably augment and improve upon the livelihood opportunity. In fact, I was quite stunned to find that this year two villages which won the water awards in the that was instituted by the Ministry of Water Resources, and the awards were conferred by the President. So there these two villages tapped on the NREGA resources to augment their water availability and its sustainability. So I feel, and I know of many examples where people have utilized this. So I feel that this is one of a major program which should continue and which has a lot of potential in the rural communities being able to mitigate some of the ill impacts of the climate change. There are programs like, for example, skilling. So there also it has had a good success. The rural highways program, which is called Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, that has also made a lot of impact, because I myself remember that in my childhood, while I was still studying, I had to trek for about 5 kilometers to go to my village from the place where I disembarked from my bus or whatever transport that was. And
a 5 kilometer walk.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes also when this was a flood season, wade through water to reach to my place. So these highways have not only enabled people to be able to seamlessly connect to the urban areas and thereby access many of the facilities which are usually located in well-placed towns and cities. Also, in terms of the livelihood, it is very essential. For example, if you don't produce milk in the urban areas, it is easily produced in the rural areas. So how do you ensure that the milk is transported to the urban areas? How do you ensure that poultry, which is grown, is brought to the urban areas? So it has in fact improved many livelihood opportunities which didn't exist for a lack of suitable communication. So this is a program which certainly is the panchayat themselves are a good example of something which we should continue to work upon. It's ultimately the panchayat, the local government, which should take on the entire or a major part of the local governance activities, which in order to make lives there livable. So there also we need to continue on that. It's now part of the constitutional scheme, but it requires a lot of effort still to ensure that it gets the support that it needs to be able to perform its role.
Interesting. Okay, so not going away anytime soon. You think it needs to be bolstered and continued. I want to talk about climate change, but first I'm interested. What is your vision for the locality development, India 2047? Where do you see we need to put our energy into the most?
See, my vision for 2047 is that it shouldn't matter to me whether I am living in a city or a rural area. I should have all the amenities that I am experiencing or availing in my urban abode as in the rural areas. Also, I should be in a position to work from there and should have those livelihood opportunities. So, for example, if people can work from home, say from tier 2 city, how does it matter if they can work from, let's say, a village? If there are enough, let's say, communication opportunities, wideband or broadband facilities available in the rural areas, they can as well work from there. If there are, say, banks or if there are, say, logistic facilities, those things can be produced in the rural areas and can be brought into the wherever there is need and there is market. So right now urban centric model is because all these facilities are concentrated here. I see to a day when these facilities become available and it doesn't matter for livelihood, for the amenities, whether I live in the rural areas and the urban areas. And I also need to see that the climate change is kind of addressed and the livelihood opportunities of the rural communities are suitably adjusted and supported so that they are able to adjust to it.
Well, that is a wonderful vision and probably a great place to end, except I want to ask you one final question, a double-headed question. Do you think this vision will become a reality? And what are the 2 or 3 key things that India, not just the government, but maybe business as well, needs to do to make this a reality, where there are no differences between the amenities in urban India versus rural India in less than 25 years?
See, a lot of it is happening actually. Since we have been living through it, so we don't realize that this change has come. For example, just day before yesterday, I was in IIT Kanpur and I went to a place where there was tele-education activities happening. Instructor in a studio in IIT Kanpur was interacting with students from 49 schools. So they had the best kind of education that was there. I also saw a kit for conducting laboratory experiments of the kind that you usually do in the secondary schools being developed there, low cost, but demonstrating all the physical phenomena. So I think we should allow the Gram Panchayats, we should equip them, we should probably help them visualize that this is the kind of life that they should expect to in, let's say, 20 years time, and bring the entire community together in working on this vision. I think one of the basic issues that we usually forget, and that is true to some extent to our lives as well, when we don't envision as to what is the kind of life, what is the kind of future that we should have in the 10 years to come or 20 years to come. So once people have seen a vision of how it should be, they are empowered to achieve that. And so one is that it gives them directions and the goalposts. Secondly, they would go after their public representatives and the governments to ensure that they are allowed to get to those kind of facilities.
And I guess in that way, I'm grasping for that thing that we all have, our device, and that way our phones and our devices is actually helping that visioning happening a bit, yes. Right? Because now rural Indians are seeing what's happening over there and thinking, I want that too. Aspirations have changed, right?
That's right. But I'm seeing it in a different way. These are tools to make that happen. What I'm saying is that when you say that I should have the ambulance facility and I should be able to reach, let's say, to a good quality hospital in hours time, which we usually get in the urban areas. So that is a very concrete kind of. So if you kind of enable community to visualize such kind of,
help them see that that's a reality.
Right.
And again, I think in media they're seeing that it exists, but you're saying they need to see that it can exist in there. Got it. Okay. Maybe we need a great Bollywood blockbuster that shows the Vision 24 that 2047 that you're seeing.
I would take you to a film called Swades. Swades is a film probably of Amir Khan, na? Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan showed what is possible for a NRI to help a village realize. So, I'm sure Bollywood should take
we need more of them. Yeah.
We are usually telling them only a village full of violence and rivalry.
True. It's true. We need to change the narrative. It's been absolutely wonderful hearing your thoughts on rural development and changing narratives. We started with that as well, which I think is so crucial. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching, and please share and stay tuned for the next episode.